We continue today this series that we started last week, entitled very simply, The Hard Way, which takes us back to the way that Jesus' ministry starts, as recorded in the Gospel of Matthew, specifically chapters 5, 6, and 7, something that we as Christians refer to as the Sermon on the Mount. That is the actual setting of the Sermon on the Mount near the Sea of Galilee, which is actually a lake in modern-day northern Israel. The perspective of that picture, you are actually seeing where Jesus himself sat, and you can imagine out there in those trimmed green fields or slopes that there would have been hundreds, if not 1,000 people or more gathered to listen to Jesus as he preached this, the Sermon on the Mount, one of his most famous messages in all the Gospels. So we too gather and put ourselves in the position of being his student, his listener. We are in the audience hearing the great Sermon on the Mount taught. The title for the series, The Hard Way, comes from something that Jesus says toward the very end of the Sermon on the Mount as a way of wrapping up everything that he said for 3 chapters. Verses 13 and 14 of Matthew chapter 7. We talked about these 2 verses last week. Jesus says that what he's been doing throughout the entire sermon is he's been making a contrast. There is a way that is broad and wide. There is a normal, accepted, unquestioned way of life that goes on in the world around us. And in the end, it kills us. And then there's Jesus' way. His narrow, hard way that is the only way to find real life. Hence, the hard way. So Jesus lays out this contrast. Where will you head? Will you head down the route toward ultimate destruction, watching your life erode away day after day, week after week? Or will you take a detour onto his way, the hard way, the narrow way? Many find one, few find the other. So says Jesus. And here's the thing about those verses at the end of Matthew 7. Everything that Jesus has taught in the Sermon on the Mount can be broken down into that contrast. There is a way of life that is normal. There is a way of life that is swallowed hook, line, and sinker by most people. And it is destructive. And then there's Jesus' way. And everything he has said for 3 chapters fits into that very basic contrast. For most of this series, we're going to talk about single verses in the Sermon on the Mount, because the Sermon on the Mount actually has these key verses on which everything else hinges. And we're going to talk about those verses. Today is the only day that we're not going to talk about a single verse. We're actually going to talk about a group of verses. But we're going to talk about the group of verses together instead of one here and one there, because in these group of verses there is actually one key idea, not many. We're going to talk about verses that even if you're not a particularly church person, you probably at least have heard of. And they are those verses that you saw in the video called the Beatitudes. They are called the Beatitudes because in the Latin translation of the Bible, the old Latin translation of the Bible, blessed, which is a word keenly featured in those verses, is rendered beatus, which means happy or fortunate or even beautiful, which is a great way of reading those verses. Instead of blessed are the peacemakers or blessed are the meek, how about fortunate are the merciful? Happy are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Beautiful are the poor in spirit. So today, let's talk about the Beatitudes. And let's hear the contrast that Jesus intends between his way of life and what's normal. Jesus says, "Blessed are these people." Let's work at understanding exactly what Jesus means. Let's hear these things exactly like his audience 2,000 years ago would have, and then we will work on mulling it over for us as his students in 2011 America. Blessed are the poor in spirit, Jesus said. What do you think that means? Where's your spirit? What's your spirit? Everything internal about you. Your emotions, your psychological well-being, your mind, your soul, those things which make you most human. Jesus says, blessed, fortunate, happy are those who are poor in soul. Those who are psychologically poor. Here are some synonyms for that. Blessed are the empty. Blessed are the desperate. Blessed are the humbled. Blessed are the humble. That's what Jesus means by that expression. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who are sad. Blessed are those who lament. That's a biblical term. Blessed are those who are broken wide open by the pain of their life or the pain that they observe in the world around them. Blessed are the meek. Meek's a hard word for us to understand because we don't use it in modern day English. There are two very clear implications from the ancient Greek word used here, meek. Gentleness and strength. So the best rendering of the word meek would be, blessed are the strongly gentle. Blessed are the gently strong. And anyone who has ever tried to live meek can tell you that it's far harder to do than the opposite. It does take strength. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. What's righteousness? That's a churchy word. Righteousness. All those things that you know to be moral and true and good and loving. That's righteousness. All those things that God endorses. That's righteousness. And who does Jesus say are the happy or the blessed? Not those who are righteous, those who hunger and thirst for it. Not those who are mildly interested in it, not those who have read a book about it, those who are starving for it. Those who feel like if they cannot have a drop of it in their life or in their world, they will die. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Blessed are the merciful, those who forgive and are full of grace. Blessed are the pure in heart. What's that mean? Where's the purity occur? In your heart. That too is internal. Your soul, your mind, your emotion, your heart. Blessed are the pure in heart. He did not say, blessed are those who look pure. He said, blessed are those who are pure inside. They're not fakers. There is integrity. You can trust them because their heart is pure and clean. Their motives are true. Blessed are the pure in heart. Blessed are the peacemakers. Simple enough. Those who make peace. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. This, of all the Beatitudes, is the only one that gets 2 verses, not 1. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness. What's righteousness? I already told you. All those things that are virtuous and good and moral. All those things that you know God endorses. And Jesus says, the fortunate in this world are those who get hurt and wounded for the right things. But remember, this whole sermon, the Beatitudes being Jesus' opening salvo of this sermon, the entire sermon is built around a contrast. Which means that there is a contrast built into these Beatitudes. These clarion statements about who is blessed and who is not. Here is the implied contrast. Jesus, in his Beatitudes, is describing the narrow way, his way, the hard way, not what's normal, not what's unquestioned, not what's accepted by everybody else. Here's the implied contrast. On the left, you have Jesus' way. On the right, you have what's normal. Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit. Jesus is saying that in his culture, in his day, most people believed the exact opposite. Who are the blessed? Who are the happy? Who are the fortunate and the beautiful? The much in spirit. Those who seem overjoyed. Those who don't seem empty and despondent and longing and humbled. It seems like in the world around Jesus that the proud are the blessed. Jesus said, blessed are those who mourn. Yeah, that's not what's normal. We, like Jesus' audience, would be led to believe that actually the blessed people are those who don't. Those who can walk through any circumstance of their own or the world's around them and do it with a smile. That's the normal way. That's the wide way. That is not Jesus' way. The world would say, blessed are those who do not mourn, or those who repress it, those who stifle it, those who would have you believe that if you do mourn, if you do hurt because of what's going on in your life or the lives around you, that something's wrong with you. Blessed are the meek. It is not what Jesus' culture taught the people who listened to Jesus that day. That is not what our culture teaches us. It appears that the exact opposite is true. Blessed and fortunate are the strong and the pushy and the aggressive, not the gentle. You want to get ahead? Make it so. Doesn't that seem to be the way of the culture around us? Blessed are those who hunger for righteousness. No, the normal way seems to be, and it would have seemed this way for Jesus' audience, blessed are the apathetic. It's better if you think you've arrived than hungering and thirsting for something. Don't you feel better after a meal, not before? Jesus says, actually, spiritually, you want to feel like it's before the meal, not after. You want to feel the pang of hunger and thirst for what is good and right and loving. You don't want to feel like you've arrived. And you certainly don't want to feel like you don't care. That's the normal way. That's the wide way. And equally, there are people in Jesus' day and ours who may be defined by the words hunger and thirst, but it is not for righteousness. It's for a promotion or money or something else. Blessed are the merciful. Doesn't seem that way. The normal way seems to be that those who get ahead, those who are the most fortunate and the most happy, are the graceless, the merciless. Those who need no mercy and give none. This seems to be the accepted, unquestioned way of the world then and now. Blessed are the pure in heart. Doesn't seem that way. Seems like the very best thing you can be for yourself is duplicitous. Look good. Everything else doesn't matter. Talk the right game. Seem like a nice, trustworthy guy, and it doesn't matter what's going on inside. This is the normal way. This is the wide way. And Jesus said, blessed instead are the pure in heart. Blessed are the peacemakers. Nope. The normal way is blessed are those who are the peace wreckers, the dividers, who when push comes to shove in a crisis or conflict moment are more committed to their own perspective than anybody else's, and thus they end up sowing division between themselves and other people. This is the normal way. This happens between people day after day, week after week. Peacemakers are hard to find. They are a rarity. Blessed are the peace wreckers. And last, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness. Nope. Seems to be, in Jesus' day and ours, that actually the normal way is blessed are the chickens for righteousness. Those who may have a pretty strong sense of what's right and just and good and don't do anything about it. Because that way, you stay off the target. You stay out of the crosshairs. You feel it. You feel the weight, the grandeur, and the magnitude of the contrast that Jesus is drawing. Perhaps midway through talking about what these things mean, you can understand a little bit why the Beatitudes are such cherished verses in the Bible. Because they draw such a stark contrast. However, seems like the Beatitudes are really about all these different ideas, being merciful and peacemaking, being pure in heart. You know that's not true? The Beatitudes are about one idea, and it's the word you heard over and over and over again. Blessed. Jesus, at the start of the Sermon on the Mount, is telling those who will hear who is blessed. What's it mean to be blessed? It means at least two things in the original intention of that word as written in ancient Greek. Who are the ones who are on God's side? Who are the ones that God pays attention to? Who are the ones who God counts as his allies? Who are the ones who know they are walking in step with God? That's what it means to be blessed biblically. Who are those people? And who are those who are whole as people? Who are those who emotionally and mentally, spiritually, who are those who have a chance to be healthy? Healthy and whole. To live deep and rich lives that satisfy the deepest parts of who they are. That's what it means to be blessed, biblically. And Jesus says, let me tell you who's really blessed. And by implication, let me tell you who's not, despite appearances. Who's blessed? Blessed now and blessed later, by the way. If you listen to the full text of those verses, and especially if you catch the way that the verses end, Jesus is telling you what it means to be blessed. He says, blessed are the poor in spirit. Why? For they will have the kingdom of heaven. What's it mean to be blessed? It means to have the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn. Why? Because they will be comforted, Jesus said. What's it mean to be blessed? It means you will be someone who will find comfort. He goes on throughout the rest of the Beatitudes to describe blessing this way. They will inherit the earth. The blessed will be filled. The blessed will receive mercy. The blessed will see God. The blessed will be called children of God. The blessed will have the kingdom of heaven. Jesus redefines what it means to be blessed in the Beatitudes. And this is where we need to pause. This is where we need to talk. And you need to become a student of Jesus and listen. Not just listen with your ears, but listen with your life. Up there on the screen is the contrast that Jesus is drawing between the hard way, his way, and the normal way. And I want to ask you one simple thing. Who do you believe gets blessed? Who do you believe gets blessed in life? Believe is probably not quite the right word, because you can tell me you believe lots. You know how I'll know if you believe it? By the choices you make. Tell me who you believe will be blessed. This is how J.B. Phillips, a great translator of the Bible in the 20th century, renders that list on the right. If you're still wrapping your head around the contrast between Jesus' way and the normal way. This is how J.B. Phillips renders the normal way. Happy are the pushers, for they get what they want in the world. Happy are the hard-boiled, for they never let life hurt them. Happy are those who complain, for they get their own way in the end. Happy are the blasé, for they never worry over their sins. Happy are the slave drivers, for they get results. Happy are the knowledgeable men and women of the world, for they are the experts that everyone admires. And happy are the troublemakers, because they make people take notice of them. Who do you think our world, our culture, we are not first century Jews like Jesus' audience that day. We are 21st century Americans. Which list do you think our culture teaches and applauds? If I may, there are some obvious connections to the list on the right. Here's the connection to the list on the left. There may be people that you'll see on TV or watch in a video on the internet who do something that looks like the list on the left. Jesus' list. But then they are very quickly dismissed as people who are idealists. They're naive. They really can't make it work in the real world. Those Jesus on the left, those are fantastic ideas. I love the idea that blessed are the poor in spirit, or blessed are the merciful, or blessed are the pure in heart, but it does not work that way in the real world. That's what our culture thinks about those lists. They may give the fake clap to Jesus' list on the left, but they are telling you over and over again that the only way you can make it is the list on the right. If you don't care about you, who else will? If you don't stand up for yourself, who else will? If you want to get ahead, you got to work hard. And if a few people get run over in the process, that's okay. That's the normal way. It's as normal 2,000 years ago as it is today. Who do you believe gets blessed in life? Who do you believe God feels are his allies? Who do you feel like God thinks are his partners? And maybe even more to the point, how do you think you can live healthy and whole? Jesus says there is only one way. You have to mourn. You have to hunger and thirst and be persecuted for the right things. You have to be poor in spirit. You have to be pure in heart. You have to make peace, not break it. This is the only way, Jesus says. There's a Christian writer by the name of Monica Helwig, who was a social worker by trade. And she was doing some thinking on the Beatitudes and whether or not they are actually true. Lovely ideas, do they actually work in life? This is what she recorded about the advantages of living life the hard way and deciding that the way to be blessed is what Jesus said, not what everybody around us says. See if you can hear in her list why it's actually better to live Jesus' way. How you can actually find life, real life, Jesus' way, and no other way. She writes, those who try to follow the Beatitudes, number one, know that they are in urgent need of redemption. Absolutely. You look at that list. Those who mourn, those who are gentle, those who are empty and desperate, those are people who know that they need to be redeemed by somebody not named themselves. Number two, those who buy into what Jesus is saying know that they are dependent beings, not independent. And they are dependent upon God and other people for their very life. Those people who believe what Jesus is saying about the blessed in life, number three, their security rests in God and people, not things. Number four, the people who buy into Jesus' definition of blessing don't have an exaggerated sense of their own importance, nor do they have an exaggerated need for privacy. 5, they expect little from competition and lots from cooperation. 6, they can distinguish between their needs and their wants. 7, they've learned to wait because they've acquired a kind of dogged patience for God. 8, they know that you can survive great suffering and want. 9, when they hear Jesus' message preached to them, it actually sounds like good news, not like a threat or a scolding. And last, number 10, the people who buy into what Jesus is saying about being blessed in life, they can respond to Jesus with a certain abandonment and uncomplicated totality because they have so little to lose and they are so ready for anything. If nothing else, you know why you want to take Jesus up on the offer of redefining for yourself who you think gets blessed? Because only if you do things Jesus' way will you put yourself in the position to live a life that is worth the term. You will live a life that looks like that list. You will know you are a dependent being, not an independent one. You will know that Jesus' message is good news. It is not something you can leave or pass by easily. And you are ready to give Jesus everything because you know there is very little to be found anywhere else. Who do you think is blessed? And how do you get there? Jesus is offering a harder, more narrow alternative. You know what verses come immediately after these Beatitudes in the Sermon on the Mount? Which means that, Jesus being a good communicator, they are somewhat related to these verses about who is blessed and who is not. They are these verses. Verses that, if you attend church or have at some point, I would imagine you've heard this about the mission of God's people called the church. The next words out of Jesus' mouth are, you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. You are a town that is built on a hill that cannot be hidden. Okay, church, how are we the salt of the earth? How are we the light of the world? How are we a town that sits on a hill that cannot be hidden? That way. The Beatitudes. It is not through clever marketing, through great preachers and great writers, clever websites, wonderful buildings and programs. You know how the church, Jesus followers, are the light of the world? If we embrace fully his definition of what it means to be blessed and how we'll get there. We will be the light of the world. We will be that city atop a hill that cannot be hidden, as much as we are willing to say, we will be poor in spirit. We will be the meek if no one else will be. We will be the peacemakers if no one else will be. We will be persecuted for righteousness if no one else will. The high calling of God's people is to embrace fully what Jesus says about being blessed. And as we do, we will shine like a beacon to the rest of the world who is lost in the illusion of strength and pride and desire. Who do you believe will be blessed? If you believe what Jesus says, you will be the light of the world. Here at the end of considering Jesus' opening verses to the Sermon on the Mount, I think it's only appropriate that I give you a moment to converse with God about what this Jesus, his teacher to us, has said about who is blessed and who is not. Why don't you start in the quiet by asking God to affirm you, not convict you, affirm you. If you have a relationship with God, odds are you're going to find a place in those lists, especially the list on the left, Jesus' list, where you will be able to see God at work in your life. You will be able to see, yes, I have tried to be this thing, and I have seen myself be blessed because of it. Why don't you pause in the quiet and ask God to show you that place? Be encouraged by him. Next, now that you have heard his encouragement, ask him that you might hear his loving conviction. Ask him to tell you, where are you buying into the wrong definition of who gets ahead, who's really blessed? Ask him to show you. Ask him to show you what he wants you to change next. And last, you can pray this for yourself, and for those of you who call RiverTree home, I would ask you to pray it for us. Ask God that we and you would be the light of the world because we are willing to embrace Jesus' definition of who is really blessed.